webinar today, From South by Southwest to Impact, What's Next for Social Good. My name is Shari Ilson. I'm the Director of Engagement at VolunteerMatch, and we are hosting today's discussion about the future of social good and how we can play a part in it. A few logistical notes before we get started. We are recording this webinar, and we are going to post the full recording to YouTube and the slide deck to SlideShare afterwards. So you'll be able to access it later on, share it with coworkers and friends and family. So don't worry too much about taking copious notes. Today is about really getting into the discussion itself. If you do want to join that discussion, there are a couple ways you can contribute. There's a chat box at the bottom right that you just used for our audio check. Please input questions to speakers there, as well as answers to questions we may be asking you. I'll also be sending you information through that function as well. Additionally, if you happen to be a Twitter user, we're going to be talking on Twitter using the hashtag SXGood, and I'll chat that out in a second. So please join us on Twitter as well. We've got a really unbelievable session planned for you today. I think it's going to get really fun. The whole point today is to take a good hard look at the way that social good has been presented at South by Southwest and say, okay, how can we improve on this, and how can we take some of the themes that have come up and apply them throughout the year to what we do in our everyday lives and just to make the world a better place in general. So it's really a challenge for all of us, and I'm really excited about it. I'm also really excited about our speakers today. We have a really awesome group. So I'm going to introduce them now to you. First, myself, Shari, and I'm mostly going to be moderating, but I'm also going to chime in every once in a while representing folks that didn't get a chance to go to South by Southwest this year, or maybe have never been to South by Southwest, because I myself didn't get a chance to go, and I'm still a little bitter about that. We also have Lawrence, who is the Director of Nonprofit Community at Change.org. Lawrence helps organizations leverage the world's largest action platform to connect with new supporters to achieve real change. Lawrence manages communications with thousands of nonprofits through webinars, public speaking, social media, and email to share tools and resources for effective online advocacy and fundraising. And prior to his work at Change.org, Lawrence served as Internet Communications Coordinator at San Francisco's Environment Department, where he launched the city's first mobile app. So he is definitely a mover and a shaker in the world of technology for social good.
You're too kind, Sherry. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Next, we've got Eve Simon. Eve is a lapsed philosophy major with an MFA in theatrical lighting design and 18 years experience in web design, UX consulting, and creative management. She's either a quirky dinner party guest or a source of random knowledge, or both. But either way, she's going to make for a great webinar speaker. Eve is creative director at Beaconfire, a web design and development firm working solely with mission-driven organizations. Along with her team of web superheroes, she's developed award-winning online experiences for clients including the Ad Council, the American Lung Association, the Diabetes Association, the Foundation Center, AFL-CIO, and the Nature Conservancy. So you may have heard of a few of those. So when not helping to make the world a better place one website at a time, Eve rocks South by Southwest Interactive as the muscle behind the Beacon Lounge. She blogs for the Huffington Post, and she's a frequent speaker about design communication for nonprofits. So we're excited to have Eve join us as well.
Thanks so much, Sherry.
Finally, Brian is founder and managing director of Little M Media, an information strategy firm that helps individuals and organizations solve complex problems. He's also the author of Shift and Reset, Strategies for Addressing Serious Issues in a Connected Society. And he's the co-author of Media Rules, Mastering Today's Technology to Connect with and Keep Your Audience. So he is really an expert on all sides of today's topic. He contributes as a Fast Company expert, hosts a regular podcast discussion about the impact of media and technology on society, and teaches consumer behavior and marketing strategy in the Graduate School of Communications at Columbia University. He has a really interesting background in politics, spent 2 years as a briefing director to Vice President Gore. And let's see, he's held senior roles at leading digital PR and public affairs agencies. He is the chairman of the board of Investigate West, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the art and craft of investigative journalism. And let's find, oh, here's another cool one. He served as the principal evangelist for Games That Give, a video game company that allows gamers to earn donations for charity while they play. So he's managed to find all the fun things to do when it comes to nonprofit communications and technology, and he's doing them all. So that's pretty cool. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks. I'm glad you make it sound so fun. I have some PTSD on the other side of most of those experiences, but thank you.
All right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to you, Eve, to get started with a little bit of introduction about the Beacon Lounge, about social good, and we'll get the conversation started.
Terrific. As Sherry mentioned, let's go to the next slide. A lot of you guys who have been to South by Southwest or have heard of South by Southwest have seen a picture like this about what it looks like. This year, the stats still aren't 100% in, but it looks like there were probably 32,000 attendees to South by Southwest Interactive, and this is probably just a slice of life everywhere we turn in Austin. If you go to the next slide, Sherry.
Sure. You know what, Eve, before we do,
yeah.
I forgot to administer the poll. Let's launch a quick poll to see how many of our folks on the call have actually been to South by Southwest. So let's do that just for a minute. And people are letting us know. I'm going to close it in about 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to close it, and you are going to be very interested in this. Can you... Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, so 96% of you guys have not been, at least the people who are quick on their finger. So this will be interesting to you. Okay, so let's go back and look at that picture. If you've ever seen any of the media around South by Southwest and you see that picture, you might also see a picture like this. If anyone so a lot of people turn off Twitter during South by Southwest because the tweets make them jealous or make them hungry or it's so overwhelming. So while crowds are part of South by Southwest, and from my personal perspective, barbecue is clearly part of South by Southwest, there's a great deal of other wonderful things about it. So the big deal for most people are attending sessions. And so the next couple slides, let's look at some of the interesting ones that actually had a little bit more of a social good bent this year. And then we'll talk a little bit about where that all came from. So many of people, if you were watching Twitter or watching the news, know that Edward Snowden beamed in for a keynote that was moderated by, I believe, the ACLU. And Lawrence is going to tackle it. That Lawrence will also mention did a great keynote as well on the next slide. And this was a little bit of a sketch of some of the themes that came out of it. In addition to that, we got lucky to have a keynote that was really focused on social good as well with Chelsea Clinton. And she put a lot of calls to action out there. I know that Brian was attending and was very, very who are actually involved in some of the social good activities this year. As Sherry mentioned, I run the Beacon Lounge, which is a space, sort of a chill spot, an oasis in the middle of the chaos. As you imagine, 32,000 people in a very small area can get a little wearying. And so Beaconfire, my company, which is meant to be a place to connect, to relax, to charge your devices, to meet cool people. And this year, Brian did a great set of discussions called the Do Good Dialogues, addressing social good and trying to sort of engage people in the conversation. Other organizations out by Southwest, and that was also sponsored by Change, and that was sponsored by the United Nations Foundation, and Lawrence can sort of get into what they did there. But they had sessions, they had mentor sessions, They also partnered with participant media to do a whole track of content that day, including, I believe, the discussion with the folks from Revolution. And then on the Sunday, there were called all actors and national speakers that were talking about social good writ large. So wherever you turned, there was somebody who was talking about this. Additionally, this hashtag that you're using today, all of us together, tried to get everybody to use so that there was a consistent messaging. And what was sort of interesting about that is we found that people were not only hashtagging stuff that they saw or that they were part of in some of these events, because it was pretty prevalent, but when they were taking their own personal action, or they were doing something interesting, or they were seeing something that was like giving back, there was this great thing where people really encouraged. It was about, at least it reached about a couple million people, that particular hashtag. So that there's an interest at South by for this, and there's an interest among the people who go there, and then an interest among the South by Southwest people themselves. The next couple slides are a couple pictures, so you can sort of feel like you were there a little bit. This next one is a picture taken from the Beacon Lounge. We found these social good and moving society forward through learning is so critical. They were part of it. The next slide shows sort of another way that we were trying to get people engaged in the Beacon. We started something called lounge sourcing. Instead of crowdsourcing, where you put an idea out there and tell us what you think, we encourage people to put ideas up on this big board, almost like a roots camp approach, and then come back and gather small groups of people to talk about it. And there were some great topics. The librarians were there. There was a discussion about Kickstarter for patients. There was concerts and causes, a lot of really interesting people. Which is coming out around. Two pictures are of the Revolution panel, and Lawrence, you can sort of weigh in on it. I don't know if you were at that Revolution panel or not in the hub that day.
I was not able to get to that panel. I think that was the same time as my panel. But to your point, Eve, there's so much social good that it's hard to actually take all that content in, which is a notable difference in
a lot of content is at the Austin Convention Center, which is massive in and of itself, but because there's so much content and so many discussions and so many people interested in doing so many different things, it has branched out over the last couple years to be across all of Austin. And often it's in a little, this is bungalow, I believe is a bar most of the time, but it's a little bungalow off on a little side road where the Social Good Hub is. A lot of content at other sessions, at other hotels nearby. So it's really, really dispersed towards sort of the history of where social good and South by Southwest have been together. And this year, a lot of it came together. So I would say that in 2010 is when South by first started doing content, actual sessions that were focused on, at that time, what they call greater good. And if, for those of you who don't know, how a lot of the content gets chosen for the festival is something, the topic. A small group of people who are either the staff or the advisory board of South by Southwest or other folks who are critical in the decision-making of some of this content determine what the final sessions are. So there's a lot of sort of people interested at that time in 2010 about what is social good and why, how can we get more involved, how can we add nonprofits to the mix, how can we encourage social enterprise. And that really began a very strong interest from South by to be part of that and to push that out. The catch is that a lot of people don't know that. So this year, in 2014, South by said that they had 58 more sessions under their track. That's what South by is doing. So that there is a community at South by Southwest who's working on social good and social impact. And people are surprised to hear that. So that obviously surprises them, but they want to get as many powerful speakers and organizations involved as they can, and as many people who are working in these companies to attend and to continue the conversation. So I think that that's an important thing to think about. And this year, it was, as I said, very prevalent that as you went place to place, you saw that there were more people doing this. And then the next slide actually shows some of the pictures from the party. Social Good Hub was during the day, and in the evening, it tagged it, this is your social good. Tell me a little bit about that, Lawrence. How did that come about? How did that work? Lawrence?
Yeah, we have been talking to South by Southwest for a little while in conjunction with a few other organizations that had been down at South by Southwest over the past couple of years about finding some way to elevate not only the great content that is the idea that social good is a big part of technology itself, and that a lot of the people that go to South by Southwest, even though they might not be technologists or work at a tech company, or excuse me, they are technologists and they work at a tech company, they might not consider themselves working in the social good field, but they still want to feel that their work is meaningful and contributing to something of value in the world. And so the Social Good Hub this year was the first effort by Southwest to have a physical place to start to aggregate some of that content and see what kind of response they got from the types of attendees that are interested in social good, and it was a huge success. I think we had a couple of thousand people throughout the course of the day. The wrap-up party we had in the evening, well over 600 people came through the door and a line out onto the street, and I think it's really great to see that South by Southwest recognizes that social good is important to attendees who aren't even necessarily nonprofit types. And so I think I'm going to share a tweet, an SXSW hashtag with the panel picker link that starts in July. So now, like you said, is the time to start thinking about putting out sessions that could get selected for this renewed interest in social good content. And plus, you get a free badge to go if your panel gets selected. So that's a bonus too to help cut down costs.
And I think to sort of to tack on to what Lauren said, a couple numbers from the Beacon. Which is sort of a social estimated how many people came through the doors, because it was always sort of busy. We have beer in the afternoon with live music. We do lunches that raise money for nonprofits. So, for example, we have a model where we ask people to fork over their lunch money instead of giving it to a vendor, and we ask them to give it to the Capital Area Food Bank of Texas, which has a multiplier on where Brian spoke, and we provided tacos and we asked people to donate to the food bank, and they raised $250, which right there equaled 650 meals for the food bank. On top of that, the sponsor who did the lunch matched that. So in 2 hours, the South by Southwest community provided 1,300 meals for the Austin Food Bank. Which blew us away, and that is a model that we have done over time and time again. And so then when we finally decided to do a counter on this year, we had 5,000 people come to the Beacon Lounge this year over 5 days, which was double what we expected, and also supports what Lawrence just said, that there's a need for this. There's an excitement for this. We use that model also in the afternoons because we, as I mentioned, we do happy hours with live music, but we raise money for Sweet Relief Musicians Fund. So they help us bring the musicians in so that people can be entertained and beer. And then we raise money. So over the last couple of years, we've raised, in the last 6 years, close to 1,000. Being able to sort of walk the talk is important too. So we want to provide a space for people to come together and talk about social good, but we also want to provide avenues for people to give back and to do more. Shari, if you want to move on to the next slide. the other event that I mentioned briefly was this event at City Hall, where there were some really amazing speakers. The folks from Charity Water were there. There were some musical performances. There were some local organizations like Build a Sign in Austin that has a significant giving program for nonprofits who cannot afford, the cost of public, but the tweets that were coming in with these pictures from City Hall just looked amazing. So again, that was another facet of people engaging in social good. And so lastly, this last slide, Sherry, we want to talk about what involvement and commitment South by has made this past year and what they're going to be making in the future. So is the whole shebang at South by. And he has a personal connection. He does a lot of charity work. He does a lot of giving back in Austin, and it's part of his DNA. But that's starting to come through in terms of the commitment from South by to do more social good. So there are these awards every year, the Dewey Winborn Community Service Awards. I believe it's happened for the last 15 years that they identify somebody from the community who has done some significant work with changing the world through technology, and every year they grant these awards to people. The SX Eve event is actually, Lawrence can talk about that a little bit in his area. There's going to be an initiative launched next year in memorial of and organizations that help women, so there's going to be an initiative around that. The picture beneath that was sort of interesting, that in the trade show, actually there was something in the trade show about social good, but then there was a craft fair 2 days after the Interactive Festival ended. How cute, this wall up there to ask people what's their good, what means social good to them, and you can see some of the responses. People are hungry for this. And then to the next point, South by Southwest does South by Southwest Cares, which often has raised money for tragedies during South by. I guess you guys can correct me, maybe 3 or 4 years ago was when the tsunami hit. And there was, I believe there's also, yeah, there was when the tsunami hit in Japan. No, I'm wrong. Someone will tell me that I'm wrong about that. But they raised money for causes and they encourage the community to do that. This year, I believe South by Southwest gives help to the people who were in Lawrence's point. One of the most important things that you guys can do is to submit ideas in the panel picker and to keep these conversations going. And then as a group, continue to take some of these learnings that are going to come out of today and in other things and other areas that social good has permeated since South by, and do more with it so that we are starting from this spot next year and we can only get bigger and bigger and years. And it's been so cool to see people like Brian and Lawrence and the UN Foundation and the folks over who did the Plus Social Good really get part of this conversation. So I'm just sort of not sitting here alone. There's a staff of people at South by Southwest who are dedicated to this. There's a woman, Tammy Lynn Gilmore, who works with content. There were 2 people at South by Southwest who were involved with the Social Good Hub, and it is a commitment to them. So if we make a commitment to do more and to get more interesting topics and get our thought leadership out there, they're going to pick up on that and take us to the next level. And I think that's probably a really good segue.
It's excellent to hang out in the Beacon Lounge when I am dragging after a long day of conversations and big ideas and too little sleep at South by Southwest. I thought I would take a turn here towards some of the conversations and big ideas that have an influence on our ability to do social good. And Brian's going to follow up with some real specific conversations that he had in the Beacon Lounge as part of the Do Good Dialogue. So I think that I'll be sort of a little bit of a high-level intro to the more specific things that Brian will talk about. But the first thing I wanted to mention was that South by Southwest is really, at its heart, a bunch of geeks that love geeky stuff. And first and foremost among that is science, and that could be the science of programming, that could be the science, which many of you probably heard of because you're all geeks as well. But Neil deGrasse Tyson is an astrophysicist. He taking the mantle of Carl Sagan, and he did a great South by Southwest keynote about his work. Broadcast live, talking about how important science is and doing it in such an engaged, passionate way, and translating the need for science education need for figure. And I think for so many of you all and the work that we do, trying to make change in the world and advocate for issues, it comes down to scientific literacy and understanding, and that's part of the education we have to do to get people to be invested in our causes and make change. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, just seeing him on the stage being one of the 4 keynotes for the event was just really inspiring to me. He was also awarded the 2014 Speaker of the Event Award, which is there's one person every year that's honored for their innovation and creativity and passion. And he won that last verbally, so it's really heartwarming to see him thank fans for his good work spreading science. And I'm also going to share a clip of his closing remarks about the importance of the cosmic perspective that literally made me cry in the convention center, because it's just a really beautiful sentiment that we're all one. And that speaking out on Neil deGrasse Tyson. But Fabien Cousteau, the great-grandson of Jacques Cousteau, the famous ocean explorer, also gave a talk about his advocacy research project called Mission 31. And that is him and I think 5 or 6 other aquanauts living in a submerged vessel for 31 days to explore the ocean and raise awareness about ocean exploration and ocean protection issues. So, and his perspective was that we do good science, we share that with communities online, we surface this approach to the world, and we begin to educate through modern media, through digital media, in a new way to create these connections with folks, lifelong connections for science and science advocacy. So I thought that was really a highlight for me to see the science on display at South by Southwest. In the upper right-hand corner, I've got an icon there, which to me represents online advocacy. So much of what Change.org does, obviously, is empower individuals and organizations to create change through online petitions. And there were some great conversations that happened at sessions at South by Southwest this year about the future, about the present and future of online advocacy. There's a panel that was at the Participant Media Lounge about collectivism, and is collectivism a dirty word? It was a little bit of a general panel about what is happening online and how nonprofits and brands are engaging individuals and consumers to make positive change. That was with Sierra Club and Tumblr and Participant Media, and how traditional advocacy and fundraising are changing. So great to see that conversation at South by Southwest. Also, a really interesting panel about the future of direct activism in the digital age, with Greenpeace Mobilization Lab, Demand Congress, Bill of Rights Defense Committee. This was a more sort of forward-looking conversation about, given the backlash against Edward Snowden, against Aaron Swartz, these sort of internet activists that have gone out of their way and put their life and limb on the line to expose, either for their project or to expose some of the secret government dealings that have been happening. How do we protect these people, and how do we continue to ensure that this kind of action is guarded and protected? And it was also a really important conversation, I think, to be had at South by Southwest, since since so much of the online action that happens comes up or some way influenced by the community that's at South by Southwest. As Eve mentioned, going down into the lower left corner of this slide, my CEO, the founder of Change.org, Ben Rattray, spoke at South by Southwest. Full disclosure, I work at Change.org, and so I'm going to be talking about my company's representation at South by Southwest. But I bring it up because he talked a lot about B Corps and how companies really are recognizing that they can do well in the world too, just like nonprofits. And so B Corporation is a certification for companies to have a mission alignment and to treat their employees better, to treat their consumers better, to treat the planet better. And there's also a great meetup of certified B Corps that I went to, met folks from all kinds of great companies that see the benefit of using business to do good in the world. And I think the technology community, Silicon Valley, is particularly well suited to meet the challenges of today's world because of everything from huge sums of capital to some more nimble business practices to just a really passionate, young, engaged employee base that wants to be doing good in the world. So I was really excited to see that conversation. And then finally, as Eve mentioned, Edward Snowden did a live broadcast at South by Southwest keynote. Julian Assange from WikiLeaks also did a live broadcast. And so there was a lot of conversation about the surveillance state that we find ourselves in right now with NSA and the sort of government snooping that we maybe suspected but didn't really know for sure until Edward Snowden pointed it out through that amazing document leaks when he was an NSA contractor. And again, I think a really important conversation that affects ultimately our ability to use the web to make change. And so I'm glad that's happening within that community, and I think that community at South by Southwest, our community, needs to be leaders in bringing that conversation to the fore. What I didn't see happening at South by Southwest related to that was a bit more conversation about net neutrality and how access to an open internet really is a key requirement for us to be able to use the web to connect with supporters, to create change, to raise money, to even share information about the work that we're doing. And so I'm really interested in trying to push that conversation a bit more. But those are some of the high-level trends that I saw that I think are related to social good and are also indicative of just how much social good type content there is at South by Southwest already. And so us stepping into this pre-existing content arena and trying to focus the conversation on the specific social good topics, I think that there's a ton of opportunity for us to continue to do that. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Brian.
Actually, we have to mention, Lawrence, that you hit something off your bucket list. You crossed something off your bucket list this year. Did you want to share that with the group?
Yeah, I play music here and there, and I was able to play some of my songs at the Beacon Lounge. So I can now say that I've played music at South by Southwest. Long before there was a South by Southwest Interactive, or I had ever heard of South by Southwest Interactive, I always heard about South by Southwest music. And so my desire to visit South by Southwest was always originally to be a part of the music thing there. I think, and I still love the music aspects of being in Austin, but for my money, interactive is where it's at. So maybe next year my mission will be to bring more music to interactive as an addition to the social good stuff.
Now, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Eve. That was truly a highlight of my life.
Brian, are you on?
Yep, I'm here. You want to go to that next slide? So I have been attending South by for, I guess it's 12 consecutive years now, and have come in various capacities. In some cases I've come on my own. In some cases I've come for folks I've worked with or am working for. But always there's been an element of my focus around South by Southwest that is about how this unique, interesting gathering of people from the creative and technology and social good. So I had a couple different opportunities this year, both as a participant and from the observing side, to continue to push this conversation. One was, as Eve mentioned, the Beacon Lounge hosted a great lunch that was sponsored by the folks at CDS Global, who are a client, but also just, one of many of the companies, including APCO and others who were participating in the Beacon Lounge, that, were not there, if you will, to kind of sell their own thing, but really bought into this idea that convening a conversation about social good, was going to yield something really important and something valuable. I mean, I got a chance to talk at that event. If you were at that event, you probably couldn't hear anything I was saying, but that's fine. But I challenged the group to think really about a handful of questions, about the way that we think about what is important for social good and the way we measure it. And I put the question out, and I think it's one of our poll questions actually to folks, or sort of one of the questions that we want people participating in this webinar to weigh in on, which is, what should we be using South by Southwest to accomplish, to drive change? When you have this incredible, unique gathering, a lot of things are possible that aren't possible at other events. And so as we're thinking about not just this year and the things that we went through this year at South by, but more importantly, next year South by Southwest and everything that happens in between, and all of the gatherings where people who have any interest in in social good are coming together, how can we continue to focus more and drill down towards applying the expertise and the passion and the experience that we have? There's just an incredible amount of talent that's gathered at South by Southwest, but it's sort of all over the place. More sessions are a great thing, but not when they're talking over each other. More people who are participating from the South by Southwest perspective, from the nonprofit space, or people who are committed to B Corps or social good in any way, all that is great, except when they are, not all having conversations that kind of advance the ball down the field, that move things forward. So I would just put that question out, and you can go to the next slide, about how should we be using South by Southwest to drive change, and particularly since many, if not all of you, it sounds like, did not attend South by Southwest, you have to have some interesting outsider perspectives that I think would be very important, particularly to people like Lawrence and Eve and I, who go a lot and probably have an more of an insider perspective to a certain extent. I also, like Lawrence, want to call out a few, I think, very interesting themes and stuff that I hope sparks, additional work or additional exploration and conversation. One is sort of how can different expertise be brought together? What we started to see, I think, more and more this year was a really effective crossover in disciplines. So there were digital and TV people together talking about interactive user experience and how watching watching television is changing as a result of mobile devices. We had people who are thinking about sports, teaming up with people who think about events and how the physical space, which is something that is very important and very unique to the sports world, can be enhanced with wearable technology and things of that nature. So there is this beginning of a crossover conversation at South by Southwest, but there is not as much of a crossover conversation as you would think with the social good piece. In fact, I would make the argument, and what I would like to see more of, and I think this is to pick up on Lawrence's point and his tweeting out of the panel picker, is I would like to see social good be part of essentially every conversation, in the sense of, if you take a broad definition of social good and you look at technology and creative and media and investors and all of those, social good is not just about raising money, and it's not just about no offense to anyone participating, it's not just about online activism or things like that. There are many ways that we can affect people's lives in a powerful and positive way. And that's what everybody's talking about when they're talking about television and all of that. So I think that is a big theme, and that is a continuing progression that we're anticipating seeing at South by Southwest. And frankly, that Tammy Lynn Gilmore, the nonprofit evangelist that was mentioned before, and others are looking for help to do, right? They can only work with the panel suggestions that they get. So the smarter and more crossover the panel suggestions are, the better off we are. Okay, another theme that I think was really important, data. Not surprisingly, big data is probably the leading conversation in the digital space at the moment. If your organization is not thinking about big data in some way, you're sort of considered not to be a modern organization. But big data was also very much discussed in the social good context this year at South by Southwest, although in some cases I'm not sure that people even realized they were talking about it under the umbrella of social good. Eric Schmidt absolutely talked about data being the sort of most powerful raw material that we have available today. He talked a lot about internet freedom and opening up democracy, and the value that getting data out of all parts of the world and applying it back to improving the lives of people all over the world was so incredibly important. And so from Eric Schmidt's perspective, there was both the utility of the data, but then there was also the risks, which Lawrence touched on a little bit in terms of privacy and proper use of data and things like that. So that was a big conversation and consideration. I would suggest, particularly going forward, that the raw material, the utility of the data is an incredibly powerful and important theme for the nonprofit social good space, and one that we're not totally up on yet. Personalization was a big idea here, which is that increasingly as we're getting into social good oriented focused work, we can't solve mass humanitarian issues in a mass way. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no silver bullet. I think we've all been saying that for a long, long time. So the availability of extraordinary data and our ability to cut that up and mash it up and present it in different ways and educate people and use it to inform targeting, all of those things create the opportunity for incredible personalization. And that incredible personalization, of course, is transforming media and it's transforming shopping. And there's no reason that it shouldn't do more to transform both the way that individuals get involved in social good activities to tailor the types of activism or philanthropy that they participate in, but also in the creation of solutions. So we can actually use the data that we have to create personalized solutions to the challenges that different people are facing, whether that's a personalized health solution or it's a personalized delivery mechanism, recognizing that the devices that I carry are different than the devices of anyone else who's on this call, or they're used in different ways, and the way to provide knowledge and teaching and support and mentoring, whatever it is you're doing, the more personalized, the more valuable it's ultimately going to be. And then Chelsea Clinton came up earlier, but I think Chelsea Clinton is the last keynote really threw down the gauntlet and said to all of the smart people who were gathered at South by Southwest, you have these incredible skills and you have access to this extraordinary data. Perhaps you didn't realize that this data and your intelligence and your innovation and your startups and all of these wearable technologies, all these things that we're talking about at South by can be applied to solving development challenges. They can help to grow food more efficiently or to make water available. They can help to eradicate disease. I'll try to find a good clip of it, but she talked a lot about, and it got a lot of press and got some uncomfortable giggles, but she talked a lot about diarrhea and how actually the solution to things like potable water and having, preventing people from having diarrhea in the developing world is actually, it's a data challenge. And we haven't quite cracked the code, but that challenge is out there for people to meet. So I think that was a really interesting one. And then just lastly, a big focus of mine, and I think a big focus of a lot of people at South by Southwest, is really ultimately in behavior change. Behavior change from a brain science standpoint, behavior change from a commerce standpoint, what does it take to get to buy or do something? And technology crossed over into that space a long time ago, but now in particular is very, very interesting for people. So looking at wearable devices and the health implications of that. If you're wearing a device that tracks your heart rate, as a lot of us do, if we collect that data and use it in the right ways, we can also provide back guidance as to how someone might lead a healthier life. Mobile devices, which of course we all carry and have become supercomputers in our pocket, have extraordinary teaching and connection ability. I think we use them a lot for fun and access to news, or watching live sports, or texting our friends, or tweeting, whatever. Those are all valuable uses, but there's also incredible use of the real-time location-specific stuff. And if you look at the ebook that you've mentioned that we put out. There's a great conversation with both Tammy Gordon from the AARP and Wendy Harmon from the Red Cross, who are both thinking in really interesting ways about wearables and how technology might influence behavior change and ultimately save lives. And then last, and then I'll shut up, is just persuasive design. I think there's nobody in the world, or at least I don't want to meet them, who would argue that focusing on social good is not valuable and is not going to be constructive. But getting people to take the actions that we want, getting them to stick with the actions that we want, that is very challenging. There's a lot of talk and a lot of incredibly smart people at South by Southwest focused on persuasive design. Almost none of them are focused on anything related to social good. So the idea of getting people to use technology more to drive a certain way, to buy clothes, a lot of that has to do with persuasive design and user experience, whether it's online or mobile or even in an offline tactile experience. So I think there's a lot to be learned in a crossover capacity about persuasive design, how it can impact behavior, and then certainly what we can do to solve complex problems or get more people involved in meaningful ways around social good in that regard. So that's what I would highlight from a social good standpoint, and certainly put that question back out that I had said before, which is, the more that we can design South by Southwest to be valuable and to take advantage of the unique gathering of people that's there, the better. So the more thought that everyone on this call can put into that, the better. So thanks.
Awesome. Okay, well, we have just over 10 minutes left, and ideas and questions and thoughts have been pouring in. So I'm going to launch into a few of them so that we can all meditate on them and discuss them. So the first thing is, when it comes to South by Southwest in particular, I think, and I think that all three of you touched on this a little bit, there's a lack of understanding that there's even a social good element going on, and it's certainly gotten a lot better in the past few years. But, I think a lot of people, even on this call, and they took the time to call in and explore it, don't understand what value there might be, for example, for a nonprofit staff member to go to South by Southwest. So I think, first off, can the three of you speak to what sorts of valuable experiences can a nonprofit person find at South by Southwest that would really make it worth it?
This is Eve. I'm always open to new experiences. I'm a designer, and so I'm always looking for places where the next round of inspiration is. And actually, the Beacon came out of a similar kind of exploration. That my boss here at Beaconfire sent me down 7 years ago, to 2008 show, saying, "Is there a place for social good? Is there a community for people who are doing this?" And there was 9,000 attendees that year instead of the 32 that are there now, and I was still pretty overwhelmed. And I couldn't find my people. I didn't know where anyone was. I just couldn't find my way. And one day there was the very last session, there was something called Pimp My Nonprofit. And some names that people in the nonprofit world know. Beth Cantor was on the panel, Rachel Weidinger, Michaela Hackner. They were talking about this idea of sort of taking nonprofits to the next level. And I opened the door, and the room was packed. And I realized that that's where the people were, and that's where our people were coming to learn from this big, exciting technology and innovation gathering, ideas they could take back to their organization. And so I personally took back to my organization that we needed to start a lounge, and they needed to give me money for it, which they did, because we saw the community was there, and it has only grown since then. So I've seen a lot of nonprofits from big and small. I mean, the fact that the Urban Librarians Unite were there, and they were there to push the idea that libraries are more than just books, I think it's what you make out of it. So once you sort of get there, and then you sort of get deep into these discussions, and you find cool people to talk to in the Beacon, or you're over at the social media hub, and you're listening to great sessions, those are ideas you can percolate back to your team. So I think that there's great value getting outside of the echo chamber that often nonprofits fall into. That if it's all about nonprofits, if you go to a conference that's just about nonprofits, all you're going to hear is what other nonprofits are doing. But wouldn't it be exciting if you could hear what a social enterprise or someone entirely different in the media realm, what their ideas are, you can then take it back and try and produce some change in your own organizations. I think it's hugely valuable for a lot of those reasons.
Let me pick up this, Brian.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick shout out as well for, Just for South by Southwest Eco, which is the environmentally focused conference that is 4 years running now, that happens in October. South by, the main conference can be pretty big, and even though it's, there are a ton of nonprofit professionals that go hang out in the Beacon Lounge, it is nice to go to a conference that's more focused on and it might be easy to get buy-in from your leadership to go to something that's more in your vertical, if you will. So, and I've been to Eco once, and it was great. The content there was amazing, and again, a great mix of nonprofit, business, innovators, entrepreneurs. There's also South by Southwest EDU, which is the education conference that happens now the week before Interactive. So just wanted to throw out those issue-specific conferences that South by is also organizing around that I think also should be included in this general social good conversation.
And it's Brian. I just want to say that I think the making the most out of it point is the key one. You know, Lawrence mentioned earlier, if you can get a speaking opportunity, then you can get in for free. You'll get a badge, which will allow you, to offset some of those costs. But I've been going for years and years and years, and if I sat back and just tried to attend panels and just sort of soak things in, then I would not be getting the value of any part of it going down there. You have to push. You have to approach people. You have to be willing to stay awake for many, many hours on many consecutive days. And things like what we did with the Do Good dialogues and then the ebook that we published, were really just things that we decided could add something to the conversation. We didn't get asked to do it. We didn't get permission. We didn't get a bunch of people running up to us and saying, could you, talk to us. Eve and I and some others sat around and said, we think there's an opportunity, given all the interesting people that are there, to have some conversations and to make something of it. And we made it happen, and it has been incredibly valuable, and we hope will continue to be incredibly valuable. So South by Southwest is one of the few events where there is a lot of structure, but there is also a lot of freedom. And if you go down with a plan, you can really do some extraordinary things for your nonprofit or for yourself that wouldn't be available anywhere else. But you have to go in with that mentality. Otherwise, it's it's definitely, I would say don't go if you're not ready to do that.
And actually, I'll follow up on that too, because there's a lot of talk. I mean, South by often is synonymous with party. People will talk about tacos, they'll talk about beer, they'll talk about tequila, they'll talk about whatever party they were at till 3 in the morning the night before. And yeah, that's an aspect of it. You're not going to get that many people who are together in one place without that being part of it. But if you can go and get something out of it and make those connections and do something unique and hear something awesome, then you're coming back with a great deal of value. So, I mean, the buzz over the last couple of years has been that maybe South by's jumped the shark. Maybe it's just a big marketing event and brands are taking over. And I think that there's a degree that that's true, but there's also a degree that you can get something out of that, and you can see what other people are doing, and you can find ways to infuse that conversation with issues that concern you and to open up other people's thoughts to stuff that they may not have been a bit aware of before.
Yeah, and what I think is so interesting about the advice that all three of you have been giving is that while obviously it's really relevant for folks that will be attending South by Southwest or thinking about it or already have, it's also advice that we can apply every day in our lives when we're working on the issues that we care about. So for example, some of the topics that people submitted to the questions I've been putting out during the session were things like measuring impact of our social good initiatives, using social media to engage supporters, closing the generational digital divide, increasing public access to the internet for those who have no resources to get it themselves. Concrete examples of how nonprofits and companies are using technology for social good. So what this tells us is that we all need to be branching out more. We all need to think outside the box about the types of people and the types of projects that we should be connecting with to achieve what we want to achieve. And places like South by Southwest are a great way to connect with those people and those projects, but it doesn't just have to happen at South by Southwest, right? So when we're asking the question of what comes next, what are the next steps, it's, think about what we can do at South by Southwest, but also let's think about how to apply that kind of strategy and that kind of mentality every day. Why pigeonhole the organization or the project that we're working on? Instead, think creatively about how it can apply and be relevant and be meaningful for more people. So we have a few more minutes. Eve and Lawrence and Brian, what did you guys think of some of the topics that I just listed out that people were interested in, you know, seeing at future conferences?
It's Brian. You know, I think all those topics that you mentioned are spot on, and they're certainly critical and deeply personal to, you know, a lot of organizations. One of the things that I would say, and that I think is a lesson that I take away from South by each year, is a lot of the issues that seem very individualized are actually shared by a lot of different organizations. They may not be described in the same ways. They may not be, you know, approached, you know, in exactly the same, with the same methodology. But there are actually fewer themes and fewer discussions happening at South by Southwest than there are number of panel discussions and number of speakers and things like that. So there is great value in you know, thinking about what the you know, what are the ways that the issues that you're facing or those topics align with other things or might be grouped into some larger discussions, because that's how I think you can take advantage of a large gathering like South by or any of these other conferences, right? Even the nonprofit events, conferences, the N10s and whatnot of the world attract people beyond the nonprofit sector because of their connection or their interest in one issue or another. So there is more expertise bouncing around. It's not all kind of internally focused navel-gazing in the nonprofit community, and certainly not as much as it used to be. But we need to broaden our focus around those themes and describe them in terms that are a little bit, you know, a little bit more open for discussion among a bunch of different people. So I think all those topics are great, but some of the ways in which they were asked, and I saw some of the tweets and submissions, it you know, it feels, you know, like people are, you know, people often feel like the problem is only being faced by them or by a small group, when in reality I think there's a lot more shared experience out there, and thus a lot more opportunity to tackle some of these larger conversations, you know, in a collective way.
And to tag on to that, you know, Brian mentioned the Dugan dialogues that we did on stage, and we intentionally brought people from outside of the nonprofit world to speak. I mean, we did have Wendy Harmon from Red Cross, and we had a couple other people who were deeply in this sector. But we also had someone from the Huffington Post talking about community building, and we also had an author from the New York Times talking about startups, and looking at that community from the lens of someone who's working in a nonprofit. There's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot that they could teach us. So I think that opportunity doesn't present, if it presents itself, great, you're lucky it comes to you. But if you make that opportunity work for you, and you raise your hand and you say something and you try to get a session accepted, or if you just turn to the person next to you at a session when you're there, you don't know where it's going to go. And then being able to an individual person to do something. I mean, frankly, a lot of the initiatives that we talked about today, that, you know, the Beacon and the Social Good Hub and the stage talks, came because we didn't ask permission. And we said, we know that there's something out there that we can leverage, and we know that there are people out there that may not be putting up their hands, and let's provide an opportunity for them to do that. So for you guys, if you wanted to be part of that conversation, we want you guys to tweet your ideas. We want you to submit your thoughts. We want you to be part of this conversation. And then from there, maybe we can figure out what the metrics are. And there we can sort of say, here's what the impact of this crowd, not behind all the efforts that were going on we're all over the place, and it's great that there are efforts for social good sort of everywhere you turn, but then there needs to be a little bit of cohesion, and we need those ideas from you guys. We need to know what people are interested in and what are those big weighty topics and what are those big social issues that we can start to tackle together, and then maybe we all do come together a little bit more. Things, one of which is scholarships. That's also something that might help your nonprofit. They do a scholarship program every single year, and you can submit, even from the smallest nonprofit, you can say, I really am interested, and write an essay about what you would get out of South by Southwest. That's so there are all these opportunities, but South by has to do a better job, and we need to help them do a better job, push it out there into the community, and that's what we look for from you folks and from people who want to hear us babble for an hour.
Great. So, yeah, in the interest of everyone's time, I'm going to have to cut us off, unfortunately. This last slide shows some of the ideas that we've come up with for what we should do next to both enrich the South by Southwest social good experience as well as apply it in our own communities. We don't want things to end here. Let's continue this conversation using the hashtag. You can get in touch with us. We will be sending a follow-up email with the recording, the slide deck. We're going to link to the Do Good Dialogues ebook so you can enjoy reading through those. As well, there'll be information on how you can stay in touch with us so we can really just continue this conversation. So we're going to end the webinar here because it is the top of the hour. Thank you, all of you, for joining and contributing your thoughts. They were extremely interesting and valuable. And thanks to Lawrence, Eve, and Brian as well. This was really fun, and I look forward to seeing all of you on a future webinar. And take care, everyone.